Goodness me, I can't believe we're already here. Welcome to the best movies of 2025 video. Word on the street is this is the only end of the year list and all the others are wrong, so you better sit down and listen up. This year, because it's 2025 and because there are so many good movies, I'm going to be doing 25 instead of 20. These videos tend to run long, so I ought to get right down to business, yeah? The honorable mentions this year include Kill the Jockey, Sorry Baby, The Testament of Ann Lee, Urchin, The Naked Gun, Peter Hujar's Day, and Jay Kelly. Great, well, let's get into this list then. 25 is My Father's Shadow, directed by Akinola Davies Jr. 24 is 28 Years Later, directed by Danny Boyle. 23 is Black Bag, directed by Steven Soderbergh. 22 is Friendship, directed by Andrew DeYoung. And 21 is Mickey 17, directed by Bong Joon-ho. 20 is the gorgeously shot and darkly funny The Love That Remains, directed by Limor Palmason. 19 is one that grew on me quite a bit this year. That would be The Phoenician Scheme, directed by Wes Anderson. 18 is one that left myself and an entire screening room at Cannes unusually stunned by the end. That is obviously Die My Love, directed by Lynn Ramsey. And 17 is the incredibly sensitive and gorgeously told Train Dreams, directed by Clint Bentley. And number 16 is Weapons, directed by Zach Kreger, probably the most fun I've had at a movie theater all year. Magnolia as a horror movie should not be this funny and scary and compelling, but it is all of the above and more. Good God, we're already in the top 15. 15 goes to Eddington, directed by Ari Aster, another grower and one that will probably just get even better with time. Not a fun movie, but a critical look at all of American society, not as a means of punching down, but as a way of reflecting, something we could all use a little bit more of every now and then. Number 14 is The Incredible Nino, directed by Pauline Lux, a wonderful little directorial debut about a young man reflecting on the people in his life and what his life has meant up to this point. Very tender direction and a phenomenal central performance by Theodore Pellerin. 13 belongs to Pillion, directed by Harry Lighton. Honestly, rom-com of the year right here, which means a lot in a year of rom-coms attempting to reshape the meaning of the genre. This is by far the most successful, unique, and rewatchable of them. 12 is All About Blue Moon, directed by Richard Linklater. My favorite Linklater film in years. This is an absolutely heartbreaking watch, led by, coincidentally, one of the best Ethan Hawke performances I've seen in years. And finally, 11 is If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, directed by Mary Bronstein. An absolute anxiety attack of a film led by an incredible Rose Byrne performance with an immediately clear directorial vision. I cannot wait to see what Mary Bronstein does next. All right, top 10 time. Who else is a little nervous right now? Jafar Panahi's It Was Just an Accident tells the story of a man who, once imprisoned by Iranian authorities, thinks he recognizes his former torturer based on the sound of his squeaky prosthetic leg. What follows is a slow, painfully tense process of doubt and a resurfacing of trauma. Panahi's direction, like in all of his work, is very unassuming. Shot that way partly by necessity for most of his career because of the legality of his filmmaking and the constraints on it. Here, that style actually leaves room not only for his actors to interact with the space, but for narrative uncertainty, which makes for an incredibly stressful watch. Through his choice of single-shot coverage, Panahi rarely places the viewer in any specific perspective. The film stands firmly in the present, which allows for memories to actually feel more prominent, as though they're filling an empty space. A crucial detail in a film all about memory and trauma. There's one distinct moment where Panahi puts us in the head of the protagonist, using one simple piece of sound design, and it's a moment so simple yet alluring, it's been ringing in my head ever since. I wondered all year how Sinners would age. One of the earliest films on this list, it was the first great film of 2025. And I questioned whether or not it would get better or worse with time. An element I just have to bring up because in retrospect, this is one of the defining films of the year and undoubtedly belongs in the top 10. I say that because I think Sinners represents what studio filmmaking could and should be, especially in 2025. A skilled filmmaker getting access to the best resources available and using them to tell a story that blends familiar genres and tones, but uses them to show us something we've never seen before, that also feels distinctly personal to the filmmaker. The film meets at a unique place for a filmmaker who knows how to give people what they want, but can also take them down roads they likely never would have gone down otherwise. It's a film that functions in pretty much every way you look at it. A reinvention of the vampire movie, a love letter to blues, black culture throughout American history, a commentary on faith, and a million other things, all whilst being an unforgettable thrill ride with one of the strongest ensembles of the year and some of Ludwig Göransson's best work as a composer. That one scene, you know the one, is why we go to the movies. I didn't really really expect to see a film like The Secret Agent this year, but I'm really glad I did. What I mean by that is this is a 70s style spy thriller borrowing aesthetics from that era, as well as other Brazilian classics, and this might be a stretch, but Italian giallos? Clearly there's a lot going on here, and you feel that rich vibrancy in every scene. Led by an incredible central performance from Wagner Moura, the film tells the story of a man living in the midst of political turmoil in 1970s Brazil, as he attempts to start over in the town of Recife under a new identity. Tempting as it is to elaborate on that, I think I enjoyed this as much as I did because I knew nothing about it going in. The film, vibrant as it is a take on memory and storytelling, specifically the ones of those who've disappeared. It's in that way that the film is a moving depiction of living under dictatorship and what's lost at a more psychological level from these conditions. That all sounds pretty heady for what is a total thrill of a watch. This thing can get silly, sexy, bone-chilling, heartbreaking, you name it. This is the film on this list that I watched the most recently. You gotta ask, could this be the recency bias talking? But with a film this rich, I'm fairly certain I'm only going to grow to love this even more down the line. This is pretty timeless filmmaking. There's nobody out there that convinces me film as a medium is still in its infancy, quite like Park Chan-wook, who this year dropped what might be his most entertaining and adventurous film, No Other Choice, which tells the story of a man recently laid off who decides to eliminate the competition when applying for his new job. The wit all over this thing is endlessly enjoyable, from how he uses screens to the very creative POV camera choices, his use of slapstick and gore in the same scene, the double meaning of the title. Nobody understands the cinematic potential of the digital hell we're living in quite like Park Chan-wook. I kid you not, there were about a dozen or so times throughout my screening of this where I thought to myself, this man is a genius. In many ways, this is the most Park Chan-wook has leaned into comedy. At times it feels like a really fucked up Billy Wilder movie. Yet like any Park film, he comes around to making it a true tragedy by the end. It's not unlike his other films in that it makes the case for nobody in the film being inherently evil, rather it's the society they were raised in, the systems that abandoned them, that led to this violence. Not to mention, this is one of his cleanest narratives. As much as I love his ability to turn a story around when you least expect it, it's interesting to see him work under a much smaller, more focused arc. It's certainly not the most subtle film when it comes to its critiques on capitalism and whatnot. None of his films really are. But that's not to say it doesn't succeed at being one of the most enjoyable watches of the year. In Oliver Lax's absolute heater Surat, a father wanders into a desert rave with his son in search of his missing daughter. To explain the plot any further would be wrong of me, as there was no film this year that left me more stunned by its story than this one. On all levels, Surat is an intense one. Sonically, the film is soaked in dark, pulsating techno. The only other film to use electronic music to this degree is Climax, but just to give you an idea of how crazy this movie is, Climax uses the music as a continuous mix, a soundtrack to a terrible party. The camera gives you the benefit of wandering in and out of the room. You're intentionally not entirely present. In Surat, the music is inescapable. Like the characters, it doesn't matter how far away from society you run, how remote you are, there's no escaping what's inside. Aphex Twin said it himself, electronic music is not a genre meant to be discussed at length, but the one time it is talked about in the film by one of its characters, she describes it as music to dance to, not to hear. That line encapsulates much of Surat's appeal, a piece of work to be felt. It's a sensory experience with sound design and cinematography that isn't overly meaningful on paper, but is undeniably affecting. But this intention is rooted in the film's central emotion, grief, overcoming loss in a violent world that pokes its head in every now and then through sightings of army trucks and explosions. To feel at the strongest level is to escape the world in any way one can, to wander deeper into Earth's most desolate places, ignorant to the conditions geographically and politically, all as a means of processing, in this case, grief. If the film asks anything, it's asking at what point does process turn into avoidance, and is there any place left on Earth to escape? The film is abstract by design and could be critiqued for not saying enough about the intrusiveness of its main characters, but for this film's intense and unforgiving attack on the senses, I couldn't deny its impact on me this year. It's one I'll carry with me for a very long time. I have a hard time talking about Joachim Trier's Sentimental Value. It tells the story of an old film director and his complicated relationship with his family. Late into his life, he asks his daughter to be in his latest film. She turns him down, and then he brings in an American actress as a replacement, setting off a chain of complicated family dynamics. I mentioned that I have a hard time talking about this movie because I never really connected to it on a personal level. An odd feeling considering I latched onto a lot in Trier's last film, The Worst Person in the World. But there's a deep sadness at the heart of this, not the kind that makes you cry at any particular scene, but the kind that leaves you in the dumps for days. I'm not sure how Trier would respond to that. Maybe his intentions were to uplift and reassure, provide a sort of catharsis through his brutally honest style of filmmaking. Regardless, especially after watching it a few times, I do consider this film a success for how it manages to capture the feeling of emotional disconnect within a family, navigating that emotional disconnect within a memory, that memory being a house that has lived through generations, and how we use art to process all of that. I don't think there's a film this year with better acting across the board. Renata Rensvi, Igna Ibsdottir Lilias, Elle Fanning, Stellan Skarsgård. Picking a favorite performance out of this film really just depends on the kind of day I'm having. Everyone is fantastic, which really speaks to Trier's ability to bring life to these family dynamics. I believe every single relationship here. Something I love and admire about both this film and Worst Person is how they never treat the characters' lives like problems to be solved. Nothing is ever wrapped up in a neat little bow. We may grow from these experiences, but that's not to imply we won't make the same mistakes again. His films embrace that, and to me, that's incredibly beautiful. If you're one of the folks who caught the Mastermind at one of AMC's mystery movie events this year, you're probably pissed as fuck. But if I'm being completely honest with myself here, Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind is flat out one of my favorite movie-going experiences of the year. And I don't care what any of you say. Kelly Reichardt's signature style of slow cinema will always win me over. A style many will be quick to call pretentious and, well, slow, but here specifically, the style feels directly in conversation with the narrative she's telling, one about a man who thinks he deserves better, who slowly ends up ruining his life because of his own delusions. It's kind of the anti-Marty Supreme in basically every single way. This is technically a crime film that ends up being about a man on the run from the law. To me, every second of this was riveting, and that's thanks to Reichardt's mastery of tone, which here is jazzy and weirdly funny throughout, even at the lead's lowest moments. It's in that way that the film is a fantastic deconstruction of this specific kind of masculinity, this male hero traditionally portrayed as a lone hero who, despite his narcissism, usually gets away with it because he's a genius. But here, he turns out to be a royal dumbass, and instead of seeing this plan ever work out in his favor, you watch him take the wrong turn every chance he gets, ruining his life in slow motion. These are characters I've always gravitated towards, for whatever reason, probably because they make me laugh and remind me of a lot of guys I know personally, but it's the way Reichardt brilliantly leans into the humor here that just completely sold me on this guy. These types of men have always felt on the outskirts of Reichardt's stories, but focusing on him here, despite this film taking place in the mid-70s, she manages to capture the kind of selfishness so common in today's culture, specifically in these men. There's something very familiar about James, played brilliantly by Josh O'Connor, who is as intentional as he is reckless. He's no less an American drifter than any of her other protagonists, but whereas her protagonists usually find drama in how they balance giving and taking from society, this is a character who only takes. That way of living, as seen here, gets very lonely very fast. You do all of that with a hazy brown and gray color palette with a jazzy score behind the whole thing with one of the best actors working today leading it all, and chances are you're gonna end up with one of the best movies of the year. I've talked a lot about relatability today, but there actually aren't a lot of movies out there that speak to me on a hyper-specific level. By that I mean, I have a weird job. I talk to myself in my office, and strangers on the internet, who I assume are real, listen to what I say. An amazing gig, a dream come true, but if you think about it for too long, it can get real scary real fast. Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cloud brings the scariness of that very specific situation to life. The film tells the story of a young man who resells items on the web at a higher price, which eventually puts his life in danger. Kurosawa brings this scenario to life through his usual tendencies: bleak tones, static shots, obscured visions, the usual. It's directed with the confidence and the relaxation of a filmmaker who spent a career honing his craft. It culminates in the human embodiment of a nightmare, which turns out to be very silly, but weirdly more unnerving because of that same recklessness. Cloud to me speaks to the idea that everything digital doesn't necessarily feel real, and to go a step further, consequences for what you do on the internet are never seen through either. The film hypothesizes, what if they are? What would that look like? What would that feel like? You bring who you are online into real life, and the question is, how long can you survive like that? What do other people's online selves look like in the real world? The answer is grim, and the film argues we don't make it out of this alive. And in a world full of people who exist more online than they do in the real world, Kurosawa's dystopian vision of society, which really is just an accurate depiction of society in 2025, works exceptionally well. This film cut deep beyond my personal attachments to it. It represents a trend in cinema throughout the year, the breakage in society because of the internet. While other films may make the argument that we're in a race to the bottom, Cloud makes the case that we're already there. We're in hell. Josh Safdie's long-awaited follow-up to Uncut Gems, Marty Supreme, is bigger in every single way. Bigger cast, bigger stakes, bigger context, bigger performances. What's it about? It's a guy who just really wants to be the best ping pong player in the world. And it fucking rules. That is the simplest way of describing what is easily one of the most stuffed films I've seen, not only this year, but in the last few years. Every crevice of this film has some level of care put into it, whether it be the production design, the details in the costume, in the performances, the score, the lighting, camera movement, certainly the plot. This risks coming off a bit overstuffed for that reason. It is certainly an exhausting film, but it's Safdie's ability to never go overboard that I find utterly mesmerizing. This movie is a can of Celsius at 7 a.m. on an empty stomach. It doesn't feel nice. It's probably not healthy to have too much of it, but it sure gets me going. While that is enough for me, it is Timothée Chalamet at the center of this that sends it into being something truly noteworthy. I'm sorry, but when one of my favorite actors working today, who I consider one of the most talented and interesting actors working today, steps into a role that feels designed for him, and he really sinks his teeth into it, I'm gonna be going a little crazy for it. But beyond that, I find it pretty noteworthy that someone like Chalamet, someone who's arguably the poster child for this new generation of Hollywood, leads the way in a film about ambitions colliding with the relentless rejections from the world around him. Insufferable as he is, satisfying as it is to watch him fall short, the film makes you root for him. A magic act in itself, made all the more impressive by the fact that it's also juggling what feels like 20 different subplots at the same time. What Marty Supreme ultimately makes clear is that this isn't a movie about ping pong, but the American dream, and the sacrifices, urgency, and inevitable tragedy of chasing it. I'm not going to sit here and say the younger generations of today are aimless, because this film, if anything, is mirroring the drive so many people like Marty feel. But I also think we needed this film, not to tell people they should chase greatness, but as a reminder of why they do it. It's been a while since my favorite movie of the year was one I could recommend to basically everyone in my life, where its quality went beyond just personal taste and was in fact a film that captured the moment. This year, that film was unquestionably Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. Maybe a boring choice to a lot of you, but this was inevitable. Everything this year was really good, but only one film was a true masterpiece. Here it is. If you didn't know, the film tells the story of a former revolutionary and what happens when his daughter goes missing. On a purely technical level, this movie looks and sounds absolutely stunning. Johnny Greenwood's sporadic piano brings a beauty and chaos to the film that I can't compare to anything else out there. The VistaVision cinematography doesn't draw a lot of attention to itself, yet still brought us some of the most memorable and defining shots of the year. The acting across the board is totally electric. The runtime doesn't really matter here. In the film's own words, time doesn't exist, yet it controls us anyway, which Bob responds to perfectly with, "Oh, fuck you, you fucking moron, fuck you, you obviously don't have kids, you fucking idiot." Perfect screenplay, by the way. Many have talked about how there have been several films that seem to be about either being a father in a dying world or how the internet has made everyone even crazier, to put it simply. One Battle is both, and is for that reason alone probably the defining film of this year. But it's the surprising direction the film takes these themes in that makes it more interesting and timeless than anything else. PTA, who's drowned himself in period pieces and nostalgia for his entire career, making a film set in the modern day and embracing the new world rather than reject it in a typical old man yelling at a cloud way, is pretty incredible to see. I've loved basically everything he's made as a filmmaker, but this film specifically feels distinctly welcoming. A film about learning to live in the new world, made by a filmmaker actively doing the same through his film. That is, especially in today's film landscape, deeply refreshing and long overdue. This film, like its characters, doesn't save the day by any means. No film is ever going to save cinema as a whole, but in a time of disconnect and isolation, this is a film that proves love, happiness, and connection can still triumph amidst all of it. And well, I love that. And hey man, those are my favorite movies of the year. If you're watching this, if you made it to the end of this and you're still listening, if you watched my videos at all this year, I just want to say thank you, and I really mean that. I do not take this audience for granted, and now is a good time to remind you all of that. So thanks for watching. What are your favorite movies of the year? And if you're looking for something to watch next year, you should check out this week's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, and incredible cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. I real quick want to shout out a new series on Mubi called The New Years. From César-winning director Rodrigo Sorogoyen comes a decade-long chronicle of two lives, Anna and Oscar, whose relationship transforms alongside their own evolving selves. Across 10 consecutive New Year's Eves, Anna and Oscar's relationship unfolds, from electric beginnings to quiet unravelings, tracing how two people grow together and apart through the years that define adulthood. An elegant act of emotional archaeology, the series excavates how intimacy shifts with age, how small choices accumulate into seismic changes, and how the passage of time itself becomes the ultimate narrator of a relationship. Anchored by Aria Del Rio and Francesco Carril, whose performances evolve in real time over a 10-year narrative, The New Year's captures love as process, messy, imperfect, and painfully alive. The New Year's is currently streaming on Mubi, and if that sounds great, you can check out Mubi free for 30 days at Mubi.com/Karsten. That's MUBI.com/Karsten for a whole month of amazing cinema for free.